Welcome, everyone. I'm Ashish Kaushal, founder of Consciously Unbiased, a movement to build inclusion in the workplace, and CEO of Hire Talent, a diversity staffing firm. We have so much disruption happening these days, from the rise of AI to shifting geopolitics to changing policies. We have some amazing guests today to talk about how leaders can build greater resilience, help themselves and their teams stay centered in times of change, and shift patterns of behaviors to show up more with confidence. I'd like to welcome our special guests who are here today to share the insights. Tosca Di Matteo of Breakthrough Consulting and host of Unlock Lab. Dr. Samra Zafar, author of Unconditional Breakthrough, Past Your Limits to Transform Your Future. Cam Pedden, Chief People and Development Officer of United Way of Southern Maine. And then potentially Roderick Jefferson, CEO and keynote speaker. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thanks for having us.
I'd love to start off with if each of you can explain or share leadership as an inside job means to you, and how would you show up and lead in that way? Tosca, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. So excited for this conversation. Look, I really look at leadership as an inside job is really about first understanding what we are bringing to the table as leaders. Really understanding what we're bringing to every room we walk into is the foundation of a healthy servant leadership approach. And I think that if we are conscious about how we're feeling, what we're thinking, and and what's happening in our internal world, that means that we'll show up as better leaders because we're aware first and foremost of what we're bringing, and we can hold space better for others. That's kind of how I look at leadership as an inside job.
I love it. So it's like self-reflection, essentially knowing who you are. Dr. Zafar, what are your thoughts?
Well, how do I follow that? I had a very similar answer to this because, when I think about leadership and I think who are the most effective leaders are the people who are most authentic. And what does authenticity do? It helps create stronger connections with your team. It helps build trust. It helps other people also show up as their authentic selves. So how can we be more authentic? When we're actually more aware of what's going on inside of us, like what Tosca said, in our world. And in order to do that, we need to develop more self-awareness. We need to understand what our emotions are, where they're coming from. How can we be more agile? How can we be more compassionate and kind to ourselves so that we can also create that psychological safety for other people? It's emphasizing the importance of understanding our own values, our strengths, our weaknesses, our emotional responses, and then how do our behaviors and feelings inform the actions we take as leaders and how they affect other people. So in order to create a healthier outer world, we need to create a healthier inner world. And that is what leadership being an inside job means to me.
Okay, great. I love it. So with the authentic stuff, I'm going to ask you one question to follow up on that, and then we'll go to Cam. Is it being authentic but not bringing all your luggage to work?
So authenticity doesn't mean that we bring everything in, right? Like, when you say bring your whole self to work, that doesn't mean that you bring in, everything in terms of your personal lives and everything, because vulnerability is not like sharing every single bit of our life with everybody. What it means is that we understand who we are. We understand where our emotional responses are coming from. And then when we are showing up in front of others, we're true to who we are. We're true to our values. We actually speak our mind in terms of like what it means for us and what it means for others. And we build trust with other people. So it's not about broadcasting everything about our lives. It's about understanding, okay, this is going on in my life. This is how it's affecting me. And this is how I'm going to present to other people so that I can be authentic at the same time, without oversharing. So authenticity has to exist with boundaries.
Yes, I was going to say, so there's still boundaries. It's just kind of understanding where you're coming from and then understand why you're acting to things the way you are reacting. Cam, what are your thoughts on what it means leadership's an inside job and what it means to you?
Yeah, great question. Happy to be here. Nice to be on a call with with such wonderful people. And for me, I took a little bit different approach when I think through this question, and it's all about like who's inside the room or who's inside your sphere, if you will, because I think I, as myself, bring a certain leadership element to my role. But I also know I'm only as strong as the leaders around me as well, right? So whether it's leaders inside my organization, inside the board of directors I work with, or when I look more internally at my own self and really examine what that means, right? But ultimately, it's how we bring all that together and put it in a room, and I think that's where the magic happens. But on the individual level, I do like to think that authenticity is the key, right? And when people understand that adjustments, right, and accountability lead to shared expectation, I found that's really the formula for how I lead inside and externally. So.
Mm-hmm. And then in terms of resilience and the ability to adapt to change, can you share an example of a time when you or a leader you admire successfully tapped into that trait of resilience? And what's the most important lesson you learned from that experience?
Yeah, great question. So in the work I do right now, right, I'm in development in the nonprofit sector. It's all about resiliency. Our world is changing every single day. I think we're adapting. When you look at the statistics around us about middle class giving, right, used to be over 50% of every household used to participate in philanthropy. Now that's down to like 30%. So when you talk about how are you shifting your mindsets, and for people that have worked with United Ways, we're kind of known as a corporate model. But really today it's all about the individual engagement. It's about relationship building, and that requires incredible resiliency. Because it's not as easy as sending an email. It's about getting out from behind the desk and really building relationships. And that comes with varying degrees of success. I always tell my team, you can't worry about the 8 times you heard no. It's about the 2 you got yeses, and that's where you get to hang your hat. So to me, resiliency is the name of the game right now. And I think our external environment even emphasizes that more.
Oh, 100%. Roderick, welcome.
Thank you. My apologies. I was having technical difficulties.
All good. We started off with the question, leadership's an inside job. What does it mean to you? And how does it show up in the way you lead? So I'd love for you to give us some insight on your thoughts around that.
Thanks for that opportunity. For me, leadership is all about showing and doing. It's not about having a title. It's not about having a role. It is literally about putting your people first and raising you. I was just at a conference and I heard something. They said that managers get awards and leaders give awards. That is literally the definition.
Wow, interesting. Dr. Zafar, what do you think about that quote?
I love it. I absolutely love it. I think it's, when I think about leadership and I think about empowerment, that power that some people like sometimes I get asked the question, what does powerful mean to you? And I always say power is about empowering others. So it's kind of in the same vein of the difference between leading and managing, or even coaching and managing. Leadership is around, developing other leaders and helping them reach their potential in the most authentic way that means something to them rather than what's good for us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then going back to the question on resilience and the ability to adapt to change, can you share an example of a time when you or a leader you admired tapped into that resilience, and what was the important lesson you learned?
Yeah, I'd love to share some thoughts around that. So leadership, requires us to be adaptable and requires us to see change as an opportunity to grow and to reinvent ourselves. So I'll share something personal here because I think it's really relevant to this. So a few years ago, I decided to switch my career from banking to medicine. So I used to actually work in banking in the corporate sector, and then I switched and I went to medical school in my 30s. And I was terrified. I was like, I don't have a science background. I'm a single mother with 2 kids. There are so many unknowns. There are financial, I went from making money to now taking on debt. How am I going to get through this? Even though I really wanted to, I believed in it. It was a very conscious decision. I have been through adversity in my life, and I wanted to learn the science of resilience, the science of healing, and bring that to my patients and my readers. So I knew why I was doing it. But at the same time, just because your vision is clear doesn't mean your path is going to be clear. So my path was filled with a lot of roadblocks. And there were many times every single day when I was like, why am I doing this? I should just quit. And then in those moments, I would close my eyes and I would, remind myself of my why. What was the motivation to doing this? And then I would remind myself of the other times in my life when I have been afraid and I have persevered. I was a child bride in a forced marriage. That's how I came to Canada. I was in an abusive marriage. I got out of it and built a new life for myself and my daughters, and put myself through university as a single mother while living in poverty, and faced all kinds of odds and against all odds and all kinds of backlash. And when I reminded myself of those things and tapped into my strengths and past successes, that helps us instill confidence and faith in ourselves, because we can't control our circumstances. The only thing we can control is our response to those circumstances. And that is what determines our outcome. So reminding ourselves of our past successes, of our vision, and then tapping into our community, calling on the people who are able to remind you of why you can do this, and who are able to instill that confidence in you. And you trust them to be your best cheerleaders because they have your best interests at heart. And that is what cultivates the hope and the vision that we need to persevere against all odds. And to me, that is what resilience is about. It's about having a hope, having courage to get through things. And that doesn't mean you're not afraid. Courage and hope actually requires the presence of fear. That's why it's courageous. What it means is, yes, I'm afraid. I believe in this. I believe in myself, and I'm going to do it anyway.
Wow, that was inspiring. I think your resilience, that example was amazing. And I'm sorry that you had to go through all those things. But I also feel like one of the other things you highlighted there is it's resilience, but also learning to tap into your support network and your community. And it takes a village to sort of make change happen.
Yeah, and I'll add, when I think about resilience, I think about it more as a collective trait than an individual. We as human beings are highly interdependent on each other. We are social creatures. We are hardwired for connection. So the more connected we are, the more we are surrounded by people who help us see our own light. That is what makes us even more resilient.
Yeah, absolutely. Tosca, you're next.
I'm like, I like all of the above. I think that resilience is really about asking not why me about what happens to us in life, but rather asking what now, which I think is the basis of what was just discussed. It's seeing how powerful we are even against the odds, because life is meant to give you a different set of cards every so often. Like if we just normalize, right, that it's meant to be a roller coaster, then rather than take a victim mentality and say, why does this always happen to me? Resilience is about saying, what now with this hand I was dealt, what now with how I want to move forward with my intention, and like was said earlier, how do we hold on to hope in that? Because to me, holding on to hope and possibility is part of resilience. It's part of saying tomorrow can be different than today. And I think about one of my dear friends, Nandia Danielle Edwards. She had a women's fitness boot camp business here in Brooklyn called the New Body Project, and it had to shut down during the pandemic. And she could have either sat there and did nothing until the doors could open again, or decide what now. And that's what she did. And she opened Atrium 82, which is an event space. It hosts micro weddings. It's beautiful. And she just reimagined what was possible for her business based on her passions. And that to me is true resilience, of saying, wow, this was out of my control, right? And what can I do that is in my control? So yeah, I think that resilience isn't about grinning and bearing it. It's about taking your power back and saying there is so many options that I can choose to take here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's also about not giving up. So did your friend end up turning it back into a gym facility?
It's both. She does both. It's a beautiful wedding and small event space, and she has classes there and runs the New Body Project out of it as well. So it's like now she's a serial entrepreneur as a result, for better or for worse, right? Because she's got a lot on her plate. Yeah.
That's awesome. A recent Gallup poll found that hope is the thing that people say they need most out of leaders, even above trust and stability. How can leaders cultivate hope for those who are they're leading? Who would like to start with that one?
I'll jump into that one. One of my favorites. I'm going to say something a bit controversial, then I'll explain it.
Okay.
I believe that hope is not a strategy, and I truly live by that. Now, doesn't mean that I'm not hopeful. I am probably one of the most hopeful people that I know. However, hope alone is not enough. You've got to take that next step and putting it into practical application. So turning it from just hope into goal, whether it be SMART goals or others, and then taking it from there and executing and making sure that around it, there's an outcome, right? And tracking those things. And I don't mean maniacally. What I'm saying is, if you don't have a target, how can you hit it? If you don't have a goal, how do you know whether or not you've actually achieved that? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people put the hope piece in, and where I'm going back to that, hope is not a strategy. Mm-hmm. Let me explain what I mean that really quickly. Let's see. We hope that we get into the right school. We hope that we get the good professors. We hope that we get a good job. We hope that we get a great manager. At what point do you take accountability and own that piece and start driving for yourself? So I hope that explains where I'm going.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's like hoping that I win a lottery ticket, not doing anything about my current situation doesn't help.
No, hoping I win the lotto, but never buying the ticket is more like it.
Right, totally. Makes sense. Kev, your thoughts are on this?
Yeah, and I mean, following up Roderick on that one, it's interesting because I agree with so much of that, and I think maybe even just like in the moment connecting the dots. That's what leaders get to do, though, right? Is they get to provide the ingredient that is oftentimes classified as hope, right? So with my team, if I'm growing them and saying, how do we hit that target, right? Versus it just being hopeful, if we're able to present a vision of how you get there, right? If we can fill in the formula, it's almost like we're taking hope from just a word to an action, and really preparing them so that, yes, they can be hopeful, and they're making decisions rooted in fact, right? And in theory. And that when you put all that together, I think it's always great to remain hopeful. That's one of the things I like to tell the team. But you're right, it's not a strategy, right? I think it's an additive layer to it. And how do we as leaders show up and provide the connectivity point from this is what I want to do and I'm hopeful. How do we get them there? How do we bridge that gap? And I think that's what we're tasked with doing every single day, everyone on this call and many that are listening. So
you have to have a plan, basically.
That's right.
And Dr. Savar?
So I'm going to piggyback off of that. I love that, that take on hope, that hope alone is not going to get us anywhere. Hope has to be paired with grit and has to be paired with action. And then it becomes a strategy. And that is true in our personal and our professional lives. Like right now, there is so much uncertainty around us. There is so much ambiguity. Often it feels like we're going through a dark tunnel with no end in sight. And that increases the risk of getting exhausted and burned out. So yes, we do need hope because hope instills in us that there is a better future. But then hope has to transform first into a vision that this is what I imagine my life to be. This is what I imagine my company to be, my career to be. And imagination is bigger than knowledge. Knowledge is based on what we know, what we see in front of us. Imagination is beyond that. It's that vision of a better future. And that is the first step, though, because we can have the most clear vision, but our path to getting there is not going to be clear. It's going to be filled with ups and downs and all kinds of roadblocks. So that requires having grit. So having that, developing and cultivating that resilience to be able to get through those tough times, go over those roadblocks, under those crevices, going, being adaptable, being agile. And an example I would give here is like, even in those early years of my marriage, when I never had any chance or any hope of going to school, I would still stand in front of a mirror and practice my graduation speech. But if I stopped at that, I wouldn't be sitting here, right? It required also taking action, applying for those night courses for high school, going to university against all odds, and all the things that happen afterwards. So it is important to have hope, but I think hope is a starting point. It is not the end game. It's a starting point, and then where do we go from here? What are the actions that we take? What are the skills that we need to develop? And those are all the things that make hope and a vision come to life.
Wow. And that's where you kind of got inspired to write your book about unconditional breakthrough the past, limits, and transform the future. Where can we get that, by the way? Is it on Amazon?
Yes, it is on Amazon, and it's widely available anywhere. Yeah.
Okay, great. Tosca, I'd like you to close that out on the hope idea. What are your thoughts around getting the most out of your leaders?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think the part of hope that employees are looking for is the desire to be reassured that they can make a difference, that it matters that they show up, that it matters that they speak up. I think it's not just about new outcomes and a new future, but hope that even me slogging through this difficult time, through uncertainty, through all the things that everybody's dealing with right now, that the fight is still worth it, because their leaders are encouraging them to continue to show up, even if the outcome is not certain, and even if the outcome is not what we wish it were. I think part of hope is saying, hey, yeah, I'd like for this to happen, but also being unattached to what it looks like, because there may be something even better that's possible. When we hold on to like, it has to look like this or it has to look like that, we're in a way trying to control hope. And I think the most expansive way to think about hope is to say, what is that intent? What is that desire? And being open to it might look or come out a little bit differently.
So do you think, again, the work environment, hope is really it's basically like inspiration, strategy, and purpose, so that people feel purpose in the goal that they're trying to get to and inspired?
Yeah, I think all of that. I think, hope is multifaceted, and hope is not, it's not passive. I think it's something that you are always actively working on, especially when you are feeling hopeless. It's like, and I think that purpose is part of it, like, especially with these younger generations of, why am I doing these things that, I don't necessarily enjoy doing, but it's part of the job or it's part of the work? What is that bigger vision of the purpose of what we're trying to do? Because if all we're doing is we're in the weeds if we're in the weeds and we're not stepping back and saying, but what it's really all for, we can get really stuck in the muck. And I think part of really operationalizing hope is zooming out and taking a higher perspective and saying, what is it really about? And why does it matter that we're doing all these little things? Because we can just get so lost. I hope that kind of speaks to, yeah.
100%. So you talk a lot about doing inner critic work. Your inner critic at heart is about doubting yourself. What advice do you have leaders to get over that and build confidence in the uncertain times?
Yeah, I think I very strongly feel that the very foundation of the inside job that we're talking about is really paying attention to what we're saying to ourselves. Mm-hmm. Our inner critic narratives, give it whatever name you want, right? Our inner dialogue, some people use imposter syndrome, but it's really about saying, what am I saying to myself that isn't true, or that's a limiting belief? Because as a leader, if you're not aware of how you're treating yourself and what you're saying to yourself, then it'll be very hard to authentically and really hold space for others and not project and not instill fear and all those things that are happening within us. So by addressing our inner critics, by seeing the lies that they tell us, we can then shift our relationship with that inner dialogue and bring in actually the language and the things that we want to say to ourselves that will support us in moving forward and accomplishing and achieving what we want to accomplish. And I think that the inner critic work is the first step in building confidence. We have to get out of our own way. We have to see the truth of the lies that we're telling ourselves so that our inner confidence and our inner knowing has space to shine. That's how I think that, I think the inside job that we're talking about is first and foremost understanding the dialogue that you're having with yourself, because that is the most important one as a leader.
So we have to learn to stop self-sabotaging ourselves so much, right?
I mean, that's a huge part of it. That inner dialogue is, well, you should, things like, well, you shouldn't speak up in this meeting because they're going to think you're dumb, or you're the least experienced person here. They don't want to hear what you have to say. And that's self-sabotage if you follow what that voice is telling you.
Yeah. It's funny, when I graduated college, I had an interview in San Jose with a really large engineering company. And they were really sweet because the night before they flew us out, they gave us a hotel, they gave us a rental car. And then they had a networking dinner or networking happy hour before the interviews in the morning. And so you got to meet some managers. We also got to meet your competition. And I was graduating college with a bachelor's in computer science. And everyone I met that was interviewing had a double PhD from like Caltech or University of Israel or something like that. And so I'm like, there's no way I'm getting this job. So I already like discounted it. So then I was like, you know what? I've never been to San Francisco. I got this rental car. I'm going to go up there for the night and come back at like 3 a.m. and then go to the interview because I'm not getting the job anyway, right? So I self-sabotage myself, not thinking that, realizing that there's different levels that they're interviewing for. So there's a spot for bachelor of computer science and there's a spot for a PhD candidate. But that didn't cross my mind. I was just like, I'm not going to get this job. And so I made it worse for myself. And so those are like simple examples where we undermine our own voice and not look at what the truth is, the reality is, and that there might be something that you're not seeing.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, especially because, this is like gender neutral, right? Like this happens to everybody.
Yeah.
That we count ourselves out and that we write the story before it's written.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do that, we are basically manifesting what we don't want. in a way, so it's like, if you're going to write a story that you actually don't know what the truth is or what's possible, then write the one that you want to come true. Flip the script on that.
100%. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll toss in. I can look at the negative inner conversation as just a negative time traveler. You literally put yourself back into a position that you've already worked diligently to get away from or get out of.
Mm-hmm.
Would you take yourself back there, right? When you look at things like that, I always I start talking to myself and I remind myself that the only thing constant is change. And so if I've changed and I've done the hard work internally, or I've gone through counseling or whatever it may be, why would I negate all of that hard work to take myself back to that moment? Look, I'm not saying I'm perfect. We all have those moments of doubt and we have that. But at least there are tools now to stop that piece of the conversation. Shift the conversation internally to remind yourself of how you got to where you are now, what your why was, how hard all that work was, and why would you go back? It was kind of like I was in college, I was an athlete, and I'd go out to parties and hang out with folks, and I'd see people get drunk and whatever, and I'm like, why would I allow my coach to beat me up all week so that on the weekend I can go break myself down? Didn't make me any better, any bigger than anyone else. It was just the thing that drove me. So you've got to find that thing that is the reminder of the why you got away from that piece and where you are to now today, so that you don't go back and revisit that. It's like saying the person you knew 10 years ago, you'll never meet that person again.
Yeah.
Because I'm not that person anymore.
So question, you and Dr. Zavara both mentioned the why. Do you guys have the why written up on a vision board so you're always reminding yourself? Does anyone do that?
I do.
Actually, go ahead.
I do, and it changes, and I have many whys. Like when you think about purpose, find your purpose. Like you see that a lot. We don't just have one purpose in life. We have so many gifts, and we discover them at different stages of our lives because we are always evolving. And it's really like it's this constant path of self-discovery that we're all on. So it's really important to be that introspective with yourself. Like, what are some values of mine that have evolved? Like my values today are very different than what they were 20 years ago, because I grew up in a very different environment than the way I'm raising my kids. So all these things, they evolve, and you can have more and more purposes that come for you. We have many whys that come to us, I write down all of it. I write down on a wall. I write down on vision boards. I write down in my phone. I create custom wallpapers that are on my phone, so I'm looking at it. Whichever why I'm working on at that time.
So would you say the why is a little bit of your hope?
I think a why is part of creating the vision, and vision also requires hope. So hope, like I said, is the starting point. Hope is like, I hope this happens. Okay. And then how am I going to cultivate that to the next step? And that is about having a vision. Okay. Yeah. This is what I want for my life. This is what I want for my career. This is what I want for my company, whatever it is. Right. And then, okay, how now do I get there? And that is the part of the planning and the grit that requires you to get there and allows you to take that courageous action that will propel you forward and closer to that vision.
Yeah. No,
absolutely. Mine's a little different. It's actually my North Star. It's my 4F. It's faith, family, friends, and fun. And especially that last one, because as adults, we tend to leave that piece out. Right? Yeah. And without that, it turns into really, really ugly. I am a stroke survivor because I had no definition or even an outlet for fun. And so again, faith, family, friends, and fun. That's my why. I don't have to write it down. I see it every single day. I breathe it. I live it every day.
Yeah. No, I was just asking because sometimes you get lost in the details of life and you forget. It just kind of helps give clarity and like, why am I doing this again? Dr. Zavara, your book, Unconditional Breakthrough, Past Limits to Transform Your Future, you write about the hardest work would be in unlearning the false beliefs that hold you back. Can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of, very similar to what Tusk was saying about inner critic. And, when we go through things, and this is something I explain to patients all the time, I was doing that this morning, whenever we go through whatever experiences we go through life, those experiences, the things that we hear, the things that people tell us about ourselves, the messages we're surrounded by as we grow up, all those things, they form what I call our psychological blueprint. And this is the lens through which we see ourselves and through which we see others and through which we see the world. So I'll give you an example. So for instance, where does imposter syndrome come from? And I've struggled with imposter syndrome in my life quite a while. And imposter syndrome is a feeling. It's not reality, right? But where does that feeling come from? I grew up in a very patriarchal environment where I was told all the time that as a woman, I cannot go to school, I cannot achieve my career dreams, I cannot achieve the goals that I have. It's impossible. And then through my hard work and determination and tenacity, I am now achieving all those dreams, right? But now that I'm sitting in those tables that I was told I could never sit at, when I'm sitting at those tables and I'm sitting in those spaces and I'm making decisions as a leader and I am changing and impacting people's lives, how does it feel inside of me? It feels like I don't belong. It feels like this is fake. Why? Not because I actually don't belong or it's fake. It's because that's what I was told. So our feelings, our emotions are simply data points, and they are predictors based on what our past experiences have been. So if somebody has lived in poverty, for instance, and now they are fine, they have a great career, but the tiniest bit of financial stressor is going to make them feel like they're going to go back into poverty again. Right? So our psychological blueprint, our emotional lens is shaped by those experiences. So when I left my marriage and I built this new life where, I have everything that is so wonderful, a life beyond my wildest dreams, I thought that my, hardest work would be to learn new things, learn new skills, right? Because those are skills and people think growth is about learning things. But growth, equally as important as learning things, is also about unlearning things. Unlearning the limiting beliefs, the messages we were told that are holding us back. Rewiring that psychological blueprint. That is the good news. Our brains are highly plastic. Our brains are highly flexible. So an emotional response that was like the highway, that this happens, oh, that's what it means. We can actually create new roadways and pathways in our brain, and eventually that highway crumbles. But that requires self-awareness, that requires work, that requires practice. So now, how I deal with that imposter syndrome feeling if I get it once in a while, I will remind myself that I have done all these things. I belong on those stages, and recognizing where is it coming from. It's coming from the people who told me that I can't achieve all those things. So people can walk out of your life, but still live in your minds. So, and that's where it comes from. Okay. And I'm not going to let that hold me back, and requires compassion towards your feelings. So oftentimes when we have these difficult feelings, whether it's fear, whether it's imposter syndrome, whether any of these things, our response is to fight, right? But fighting never works. Emotional suppression actually leads to emotional amplification. The more we fight, the bigger it becomes. It's like that chocolate cake that sits in the fridge and you're like, I'm going to ignore it. I'm not going to eat it. And then what happens a few days later, you eat the whole thing. So it actually becomes bigger. So instead, being compassionate, recognizing it. Yes, this is what's happening inside of me. I can hold space for it, and I can still choose to move forward in a courageous way. So understanding our emotional responses gives us the opportunity to transform them into healthier ones that propel us forward in life in a way that is aligned with our values. So that is what a lot of my work has been, is to unlearn those belief systems and rewire my brain and show up as a better leader, as a better parent, as a better woman, as a better mother that is more aligned with who I am. I grew up in a very shame-based parenting, and I am a mother to 2 queer daughters. And I have had to learn a lot of things, and more importantly, unlearn a lot of things to show up as the mother that they deserve and that I want to be for them. So that applies to all facets of our lives, whether it's personal or professional.
Wow, that was really insightful. I think your next book should be called Unlearning.
Okay, I will take that as a potential title.
Cam, to follow on that, what does cultivating community and connection play in resilient leadership? And how do we do that? And I'd love to also get your thoughts on what Dr. Zafar just said.
Yeah. So perfect lead in, because I do think everything is about community in every walk of our life. There's a saying out there where, and I have an MPA, so, like all politics are local, but in reality, like life is local, right? Like I think we get so concerned on a regular basis, especially with the way things have evolved today in terms of access to like social media instantaneously, where we're consistently concerned, and rightfully so, about everything going on around us, but that can come at the cost of seeing like the thing right outside your window, right? The thing that's beautiful and really cultivating community for you every day. So actually walking into that coffee shop in the morning and getting to know the barista versus talking on your cell phone or scrolling through it and seeing the negative thing that's happening a town over or a country over. Yeah. And again, not that you shouldn't prioritize those things, but it does come at the cost of what's right in front of your eyes. And just to relate this a little bit to the last answer, I would say, I'm a kid from rural Tennessee, right? Like I'm a first generation college graduate. And it's similar, like it is unlearning behaviors, right? And not that like my parents, they were fully vested in me, said I could be who I wanted to be, but that just wasn't the track for everyone in the town I came from, right? Like I graduated with 73 kids. I think 6 of us went to college, right? And after the first semester, we were down to 2. And now, like when I do go home, right? And so a kid from Tennessee who cut his teeth in Ohio and is now thriving in Maine. And I literally used to have people tell me when I hit a certain platform, like, you've made it, right? Like you're where you're supposed to be. And I just kept asking, instead of what's my why, I was like, why not? Like, why not take the next step? Why not do this? And I know I've talked with Tosca about this a little bit, but when I tell my story and share it with people, I had a great career in Cleveland, Ohio. And when my partner and I decided to leave it, she was a teacher. I worked in the corporate world. We fully bet on herself. She started her own business. I went the nonprofit route. Every single person around us was like, what the hell are you doing? And now 4 years later, those same people are like, how in the hell do you do that? Like, that's the life I want to live, right? And I think it's like, it's betting on self and removing those doubts and just like unlinking from all the parameters people try to put around you in the box they build, because we're like our own creator of our own path. And I think to tie it back in and wrap up here is, you can really only be as successful, and I said this in my opening, with the people you put around you. And that's what I see as community, whether it's your own children and encouraging them to be exactly who they are and building a belief that they can do that. It's the person you interact with every morning at your first stop. It's the person who answers the phone in your office building, right? Like, I think so often we get caught up in building our network that we forget about our community. And again, to me, it's just how you can do both. They don't have to come at the cost of one or another, and then pulling everyone together. So just like all of us today, this doesn't have to be the only thing we ever do together. I think it's the ability to say like, wow, those are really insightful thoughts. Let me jump on that next call and follow up and see where I go from here and build that community. So I just think in today's world, community is more important than ever. It gives you your grounding. It gives you your why, your purpose, and your fun. As Roderick would say, like, we all take ourselves very seriously, and it's okay to just have fun, and you need community to do that.
No, absolutely. Community also includes probably how because you said it's important about who you surround yourself with, right? And I think that also probably now aligns also with like what social feeds do you have and what friends you have on your feeds, because that also affects your inner voice, right? In your community. Roderick, the Gallup State of the Workplace report finds employee engagement has dropped 21% since 2024, with loss of productivity costing the global economy roughly $438 billion. What do you think is the most important trait a leader or manager needs to do to keep their teams engaged?
Empathy, being human, and being real. I think that it is more important now than ever, especially because we're in an era where a couple of things. One, AI is so pervasive, and for the right and wrong reasons for sometimes. And secondly, because, I firmly believe that social media in some senses, it's wonderful, but in other ways, it's made all of us like social. Mm-hmm. And the same goes for leadership, right? We have to remember that this is not a project manager. They're not a program manager. They're not a trainer. This is a person that has a real life. And, as it has been said, life is lifing right now on a number of levels. So I think the best thing that we can do to personify leadership is literally to stop for a moment and ask some questions. So I start every single meeting, with a 3-part question. And it goes this way. Do you want me to listen? Do you want me to coach? Or do you want me to fix? Let me say that again. Do you want me to listen? Do you want me to coach? Or do you want me to fix? And the reason I do that is twofold. One, as leaders, we're natural fixers, right? No surprise. Most of the time, it's not what people need. Sometimes they need to get things out of their head, right? And other times, it tells me as a leader what ears to put on and to remind myself that a leader is more about listening than talking sometimes. And so with that, it now allows them to let the other person know and feel this time is all about you. So you tell me what set of ears to put on, and then I know what direction to go with you.
You know, vision kind of came. Have you ever seen the video? It's not about the nail,
Yes.
where he's trying to solve the problem of the pain that she has in her head, but she wants him to just listen and understand what she's going through.
Absolutely.
Completely that. I remember that. It's a good, you brought up some great points. LinkedIn data shows that only 15% of employees say their managers have supported them in career planning in the past 6 months. Do you think that leaders need to spend more time managing or coaching? And what's the difference between managing, coaching, and leading?
Oh, great point. I'll start by saying this. With a 30-year corporate career now, I realized that most leaders and managers don't know how to coach. Right? What they do is, and what I've seen is they either show how they got to where they are, and by the way, that no longer exists and generally doesn't work anymore, or B, they start micromanaging, right? And I have never heard those words put in a positive light, right? So for me, a manager is someone that leads from the back, right? I'm back here. I got you covered. I'm looking out for you. But what happens if you're leading them into a bad situation? Well, you're the last one that gets hit, right? To me, a leader is someone who leads from the front and then moves around to the back and forth to make sure that everyone is okay, right? And so, in a coach for me is someone that focuses on, in my mind, two things: providing and protecting. As I said earlier, managers give awards, leaders give them, but they take it beyond just that award and they put wood behind the arrow and they make sure that they're constantly iterating and going back to touch and see. Because as I said earlier, that person that you dealt with a month ago, a week ago, a day ago is not that same person that stands in front of you. So it's important to constantly do pulse checks. And I think that's what some of the greatest leaders that I've been fortunate to work with under and be mentored by, and they always take time to come back and do pulse checks because things change from day to day. You don't know what happened. You know, you've lost a family member, you've lost a pet, things have changed, your job is going different, all of the plethora of things that are going on in the world. There are certain days I feel great. There are other days I'm like, where in the hell is the world going right now? So you've got to take time and check in with people, but not, hey, how are you feeling? It's not about that.
Yeah.
It's really about, and I ask the question, I'll send a text out or I'll call someone and I ask a very simple question. And it's this: how are you doing? Not feeling, but how are you doing today? Because I'm not asking broadly. I'm trying to find out right now. Is there something that I can do to help you along? I may not be able to make your life easier, but my goal is to make sure that I can help just a bit better than it was before we had that conversation.
I love that. So we're getting close to the end. I wanted to thank you guys all. So we have this idea of this concept called microprogressions and consciously unbiased. And the idea is that if we all make little steps, it can compound change and increase performance in organizations. So what's one microprogression that you think leaders at all levels can do to stay centered and help their team stay centered and engaged in disruptive times? And Tosca, I'd love to start with you on that.
I think that the most productive, most powerful and impactful thing that leaders can do as a micro progression is to give themselves the space to ask how they are feeling, to really get in touch with like what's underneath the doing and the busyness, and like, how are you as a leader being impacted? What feelings are coming up for you? It was said so eloquently earlier, right? That we have to move through our emotions because it will transform. But also, that's how we hold space for other people and their emotions as leaders. So it's not necessarily comfortable, and I think it's not a practice that many leaders do, but I think it's game changing to stop and say, what was today's impact on my emotional state? And do I need to release some of that? Do I need to address some of that? You know, that's the next step. But the first step is just giving yourself permission to feel.
100%. I love that. And Dr. Zavara?
I love that so much, Chaska. And I would, extend on that a little bit about navigating disruption and uncertainty, which we're surrounded by right now. It requires us to be emotionally aware and, more importantly, emotionally agile. And what that means is holding space for our emotions, as well as then choosing courageous actions that propel us forward instead of take us back. And taking us back doesn't mean we actually go back, physically or in reality. It's taking us back emotionally. So let's say if we have faced adversity in the past, it can make us hyper vigilant in the present. If others have hurt us in the past, we can find it difficult to trust others now, right? So all these big emotions that we may feel in times of uncertainty are very normal and very natural. And I like to break down emotional agility as like a 3-step process, which I think we can write down, and I practice it myself, is that one is compassionate acceptance. Don't fight the emotion. Accept it in a compassionate, non-judgmental way. Remember, I said emotional suppression leads to emotional amplification. So being compassionate and just noticing it, not, even just saying, instead of saying, I am sad, say, I feel sad. You are not your emotion. Your emotion doesn't own you, because emotions change. And if you identify with your emotions, you're gonna fluctuate. Your sense of self is gonna fluctuate, right?
Sure.
We can be a strong and happy person and still have sad and weak moments. That is okay, right? Number 2 is honest reflection. What is this emotion telling me? Where is it coming from? Emotions are windows to our souls. They are data points. So is it coming from my past patterns and my past experiences, or my current values? And then number 3 is courageous action. What action can I take that is going to bring me closer to my values and closer to the vision that I have for myself and the world?
I love that. And Cam, you're next.
Yeah, I'll keep it simple. People who know me know I like my catchphrases, but we've been talking a lot recently about space and time, right? How are you creating it? How are you spending it? And how are you adjusting it? And I think when you look at life that way, there's only so much space and time out there. So how we spend it is incredibly important. And I think even more so for people in leadership roles. So I'll leave y'all with that.
Okay, great. And Roderick.
I've got 3 things as well. And I want to thank the other folks for giving me a different set of lenses today as well, and opening up, if you will, my third eye. So thank you to Chaska, to Dr. Samra, and to Cam. I would say, first and foremost, learn to give yourself grace. And I mean the same level of grace that you give others. Because there are so many times we say things to ourselves that we would never say to other people. So give yourself that grace. The next is learn to be present. If you're so focused on what just happened or what you're working on, you lose the moment of being present. And then the third is to give both yourself and your teams as leaders permission to make mistakes. Get away from perfection. We all know it's impossible. However, we still chase it every single day. How about this? Get off that hamster wheel. Stop chasing perfection and give yourself and your team permission to make mistakes.
I love it. Well, thank you all. This is very insightful and inspiring. And it does give us all hope, I think. So really enjoyed this discussion.
Thank you so much for having us. And just what Roderick said, I'll just piggyback off of that. One of my rules is whenever I catch myself being unkind to myself in my own head, like talking to myself critically, that inner critic coming up, I always close my eyes and say, would I talk to the person that I love the most in this way? Would I talk to my daughters this way? And if the answer is no, I got to stop talking to myself this way. So talk to yourself like you would talk to the person you love the most.
Amazing. That's great advice. Well, thank you all.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.